Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. In today's edition, we have Nyk Cowham from Menabrea Labs. He is the CEO and co-founder. Welcome, Nick. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for inviting me, Anthony. It's great to meet you.
Great to meet you as well. So, right now, it is morning for you and evening for me. You're currently located in Thailand. Um, so, what made you make the move over there, and what are you building on Cardano?
I'd like to say that it was a very strategic choice to come to Asia, but actually it was a bit of an erratic choice. So originally I'm from the UK, and when I was about 28, I moved to the US. So I was in the Washington, DC metro area for about 15 years. And I realized after that time, I was a bit stupid moving to another English speaking country. Because if I'd have moved somewhere where they didn't speak English, I'd know another language by now. And I've always had this romantic vision of running away to Asia. And so those were kind of two factors. And the other thing is I hate snow. So I don't know. You're kind of in Miami area, I think, so maybe the snow issue isn't such an issue. But up in the kind of East Coast US, it can get very bitter. And so one of the things that I most like about Thailand, it doesn't snow.
Right. And you have over 30 years of experience, correct, as a computer engineer. Um, where have you been? What have you learned along the way? And how did you end up in the blockchain space with Cardano?
So yeah, I from like very early days in the 80s, um, just before leaving school, I went to a career fair and they had this very old, we might call it a laptop today, but it was like the first portable computer called the Osborne One. Um, and I've only seen it again since in the Smithsonian Institute as a museum item. Which was which was a little bit demeaning for me. But they were demonstrating the ELIZA program, which was like a mock chat GPT-4. So it's like you could interact with a computer, and I fell in love with it, and I thought it was the most wonderful thing I'd ever seen. Um, and so I decided that's what I wanted to do was computing. Um, and this was kind of around 1984. Um, and so then I did a. So in the UK we have a an institute called City and Guilds. It's very old for like trade skills. And so I did a City and Guilds in information technology. And this was back in the days when like the first Mac was like this amazing thing, right? The Apple computer. We had one in the facility where I was training, and it was guarded by like it was a holy object. Um, so I did a lot of. So originally, I actually um, trained as a COBOL programmer for mainframes. Uh, I never actually got to do a job doing that because during that era when the PC was really taking off. So most of my career has been on PCs or on server side, kind of later on in Linux and things like that. So when I moved to the US, I had to get a job. I ended up doing various things, including being in finance and insurance. Um, but it was at a time when, so I was in Virginia, West Virginia at the time, and Virginia was like the new Silicon Valley for the internet with AOL in Northern Virginia. So then I very early got into the internet development. So I've gone from Web 1 to Web 2. So Web 3 is kind of like the next logical choice, I guess, right?
Does it feel like a real tangible movement more than kind of sometimes this skeptical fad that some people that are kind of, I wouldn't say pessimists, but um, may not see the value in kind of all these hot terms like Web3 and decentralization? Then you have a lot of these pseudo decentralized entities fall by the wayside and they say, aha, this is why I told you this wouldn't work and it's all a scam. Does it really feel like a tangible thing? And how does that relate to kind of that feeling around the dot-com bubble when everybody was chomping at the bits to get into these IPOs and all of these kind of not well understood new technologies emerging out into the public domain?
Sure. So, Web 3 is a marketing term. So was Web 2, 2.0, right? At that time, we were very skeptical about Web 2.0. It's like, it's just marketing. We'd been doing a lot of that stuff before. I mean, I was doing Web 2.0 before it became like a marketing term. So, um, I think it's a good question. We don't really know, I think is the honest answer. You have to see how it matures. Right now, I think what we call Web3 and the crypto space, it's kind of it's at the hobby stage. It's at the, for many people, it's kind of like a very interesting hobby, but we also see the potential for a lot of value there. And so, like, I remember the dot-com bubble days. Um, and it was the same thing. There was lots of crazy ideas, right? Just everybody was like getting funded for all sorts of things that couldn't possibly deliver any value, right? Um, but at the same time, there was people like us, the company that I was working for, we were working with government agencies and NGO foundations, and we were delivering real value. So it didn't really hit us. I wasn't in the kind of startup space at that time. I was in a we'd been around for about 2 or 3 years, but delivering real value to real organizations. And that's the key. If you're not, if you're not doing business, if you're not doing something real in the real world, then it's just an interesting possibility, a potential. And I don't think we've quite found that yet. I think we're kind of at that point where we're really starting to say, yes, this is interesting technology, but can it deliver real world value? I think it can. I mean, definitely the technology is there, but we do face challenges that we didn't face in the kind of dot-com era, which is things like regulatory constraints. We have some very real enemies, people who want us to fail. So, and we have to be aware of that, and we have to negotiate that. So that's something that's quite different from like just any other kind of bubble, right? Things do bubble. We have bubbles throughout history. There was the railway bubble, right? We don't think of that as but at the time it was like, yeah, obviously railways, wonderful. Everybody gets to travel, but people poured so much money, they lost a lot of money building railways, right? So, and then of course automobiles came along. So it's a natural part of developing an industry. You're going to have bubbles. So just because there's a craze doesn't mean there's no real value there. So you have to put things in perspective.
I see. Yeah, when I think about your point about in Web 2 and kind of the earlier mid 2000s, you had like these notorious characters like your Mark Zuckerbergs and kind of these um, guys that didn't really set out to make the next revolutionary social media website, but may have started doing like a hot or not um, prototype of a website where they would rate people's faces and then say if this person was attractive. And I know Facebook began on the college campuses. So it really took off more as a hobby for somebody that was bored, and a lot of interesting ideas come out of boredom, right? And then Facebook is, the manifestation of that. Or if you look at the early days of Twitter, it's hideous to look at the front page back then. And then, we have the world's richest man buying it for billions, tens of billions of dollars. So that's an interesting insight. A lot of times we're kind of going with the current and we're not looking back to see how these patterns have kind of repeated themselves, regardless of what technologies were being advanced at the time, or what interesting developments were taking place, or what bubbles share similar traits to what occurred and will probably continue to occur until we shake the real value, as you say, out of the speculative hot things to invest in. And when you're referring to enemies, I mean, something that strikes me about this new technological advancement is that you're digitizing money and you're allowing people to invest in these sort of tech startups that have yet to be labeled as securities in many cases. But you can invest in them in a direct manner versus before you had to go through the traditional gatekeepers. You had to get the investor funds. You got to get the IPOs. You got to pull real fiat money together. Now we're saying you don't need the fiat money. You can just hold on to this token and you have stake in the ecosystem, which is obviously an existential threat if we're looking at the grand scheme of the global financial system. Um, but it's kind of, at least in my view, regulation is like a double-edged sword. If it can really hold back innovation in some jurisdictions, and in another sense, without proper safeguards, institutions and regular retail people won't be able to safely invest into these things because they're not required to divulge the same financial information that you would have to do, for example, for an IPO.
Mhm.
It's really a unique time, and it's kind of breaking things very fast, and then picking back the pieces up later, and seeing where we don't want to crash again, and hopefully we're headed into more calmer waters going forward, so people like yourself can create and without so much criticism attached to the the platforms you're building on. Um, so going back to Cardano, what is it about Cardano that made you want to build there in the first place? And again, what are you tangibly building there that is of value that can be applied to the real world in the near future?
So, so I got interested in. So I didn't fully answer your one of your earlier questions, which is how I got into the crypto area. So in around 2010, after I'd moved to Thailand, I came across the Satoshi white paper, and I thought Bitcoin was such a wonderful idea. I actually started uh, uh, mining through a pool, and one of my biggest screw ups was after making like 2 Bitcoin. I kind of got a bit bored, and I was thinking, yeah, they're never going to let this fly. Like the powers that be aren't going to let this pass under the radar. And unfortunately, then I kind of lost the keys to that. So that 2 Bitcoins disappeared. But I still loved the idea. And so I kept on, coming in and checking like what was the progress. And then Ethereum came out, and I remember checking back, and there was this new kid, Cardano. Um, but I just loved I immediately clicked with Cardano because it was so based on sound mathematics, sound the idea of formal methods that, the big risk when you're dealing with people's money, right? Their savings. You can't screw up with that. And so you need very disciplined software engineering. And, we've experienced that so much now, with hacks, people losing vast amounts of money that, I mean, make your eyes water, right? Um, and that that can't happen. And so it's the security guarantees have to be there. It doesn't matter what else it can do. It doesn't matter what they serve on the airplane and how comfortable the seats are if it can't stay up in the air, right? So that's kind of like the core value. It needs to be, it needs to have that engineering discipline. It can't just be like, oh, let's just try a few things out, move fast, break things. That's a terrible idea when you're dealing with people's money. It's okay if you're building Twitter, right? Okay, it goes down. I'll wait a few minutes. It's not a problem. When it's people's livelihood, their real lives, you can't mess up with that. It can lead to death. People losing so much money they jump out the window level of responsibility. So that's the core thing. It's not the easiest platform to work with, to be honest, as a developer. The space that we're working in right now, and we've kind of pivoted a few things, a few times, of how we're managing our business and our overall strategy. So right now we're working on a product called Portcullis, which is ultimately we hope a P2P, peer-to-peer retail business network that's using the blockchain to take payments, real world payments, kind of getting back to the original idea of what crypto is supposed to be, back to that original idea of a cryptocurrency, which I think we've kind of lost a little bit. We've kind of got a little bit distracted with, Bitcoin. Now it's a store of value. It's not something you necessarily make payments with. The big narrative is, oh, it's a store of value. And then in the smart contract space, like Ethereum and Cardano, it's DeFi, right? Well, these are very much kind of more game-like applications. But very few people are really talking about cryptocurrency, like as the core idea. That's kind of like hasn't really worked out. So we need to find a new narrative for crypto. So we're trying to get back to it's not going to cryptocurrency is not going to be a thing unless people. I don't want to borrow from Sam Bankman-Fried, but if you can buy a banana with your crypto, right? So you need until we get there, we've not really got there. I think we haven't seen the potential, and that's the most threatening thing for the powers that be, is that for the currently invested old guard of the traditional system, the idea of having this privately owned money that is separated from state power, that's very intimidating for a lot of people. But that's only going to happen if we if you can actually spend your crypto. There's no point having it unless you can spend it, right? That's what money's for. It has to flow. And so there's two sides. We're in a bit of a vicious circle, right? On the one hand, well, I don't want crypto unless I can go somewhere and pay for stuff. And then on the other hand, the business is, well, I don't want to invest in an infrastructure for something. Well, there's not enough people demanding it. So it's this demand circle, the supply demand circle. So we're looking on the business side. of how to enable businesses to very easily accept various crypto. Um, and so our first product is a point of sale system. It's not very sexy. It's kind of like a fairly mundane, it's like accountancy, writing accountancy software. Most developers, that's not their ideal dream job, but it's important. So we're looking at business tools, ERP tools, accountancy tools, getting them enabled for very easily working with crypto as any other currency. So that's kind of our strategy is, first of all, we've got to get the businesses enabled, right? And so to be crypto ready. So they may not actually be using it, but our products are going to be crypto ready, so that when the demand is there, you can just turn it on and start accepting these payments. So it's kind of making the rails smooth so we can make that transition. Does that make sense?
Yes. Having the option there naturally will bring about some adoption. It's important to not make things mandatory to use because it frightens people. But having the option to do so allows them to get curious and explore it more, especially if they're, well, this kind of goes into my next question, which is the skeptics' attitude towards crypto and accepting them as a form of payment, right? The low-hanging fruit of criticism would be, well, why would I want to accept as a merchant something so volatile in nature that can easily go down after that person buys a cup of coffee? What would you say to kind of that status quo, skepticism and with its with respect to being a fair opinion.
Right. So that touches on the issue of retailer liquidity in terms of, yeah, that's a very real concern. So, I mean, there's a couple of developments that we have is things like stable coins, which is obviously of benefit for retailers. But that's kind of up in the air in terms of regulation, particularly in the US. And we are a US-based company, actually very focused right now on Boston area. So one of the things that Facebook did well, they started local. And so we think locality is very important. So what you want is to set up a network where you can very quickly not just exchange, take payments off end consumers at the point of sale, but then there's another side to this is how do people get their crypto? And so if you're a point of sale system, so let's say, oh, I can't get a bank account, I can't get the regulation has clamped down on central exchanges. I could still go to a local store and buy something with my with regular cash and request change back in crypto. So it's another way of acquiring crypto without the central exchange, without dealing with the DEX. We take care of that kind of exchange. And if in the back end, I as a retailer, I know that in my area, lots of people are, carrying Ergo, for instance. Let's say that, Ergo takes off as that's a particular cryptocurrency in Baton Rouge, right? For some reason, right? Just as a user group there. And they're like, yeah, they're always wanting some Ergo, some Erg, right? So maybe, I don't have enough. So you can exchange some crypto or some cash on a more private exchange. which is kind of a peer-to-peer between businesses. So in terms of what we're looking for in terms of technology, we're very interested in the Hydra heads in Cardano for fast settlement times, because it's got to be quick. You can't be standing there at the till waiting for your crypto to clear. So I think the technologies are there for us to do it, right? And the other thing in terms of exchanging the crypto, we're quite interested in Ergo's Rosenbridge, in terms of being able to kind of exchange different cryptocurrencies in a secure and reliable way. So, so that's another leg of it is, it's not just being able to make payments, but also how do I get my crypto? But that provides a liquidity option for the retailer. So it lowers their risk of holding onto crypto that may be going up and down, and that volatility issue, if they're able to, I just offload it. I have a few people, they collect, they're accumulating crypto, and it's just a very convenient way for them to get good price crypto without having to deal with a centralized exchange. Does that make sense?
Yes. So you would offer sort of a private liquidity provision for these retailers to then um, take that liquidity and then interchange it in a peer-to-peer way. So it would be from merchant to merchant, taken from the same liquidity pool, correct?
Yeah, it's kind of like here in Thailand, if you try and buy something with 1,000 baht note in a small shop, they'll be like, they might not have the float to give you change, so they'll kind of send somebody out and they'll go to the shop next door or wherever, and they'll get change, and you're waiting there, right? So they don't always have that kind of liquidity on hand. Well, it's the same situation. I offer you a crypto, or I want change back in a crypto you don't have. If you can just kind of automatically, the system will be able to negotiate. Well, we do have this crypto, let's do an exchange, and then you're able to make the change. So you become more reliable as a crypto provider, right? So legally speaking, there are certain limits before you as a retailer become considered a money service business, and then have to be registered and regulated. But it's actually quite high. It's about $1,000 per person per day. So that's sustainable on a peer-to-peer kind of local network. Does that make sense? So you don't need the AML, you don't need, it's a peer-to-peer transaction. And I think that's the key to, it's one of the ways in which, even in a regulatory environment, and the uncertainty we have right now, there's not too much uncertainty on that peer-to-peer. You're doing just like cash, right? Cash is an anonymous payment network, right? So we're not doing anything remarkable. We're not doing anything weird like central exchanges. We can keep it under the radar. It's not a public network. We're not introducing those risks. We're dealing with a more permission system that interacts with the permissionless networks.
I see. And the settlement layer would be Cardano and Hydra and Rosenbridge potentially as a sort of like the base layer, the layer two. I believe Hydra is a layer two for a scaling solution, and potentially Ergo's Rosenbridge as sort of intermediary of security.
Right. For having supporting the exchange of tokens. So you want to have a rich ecosystem. We can't say, I don't think there's going to be one token to rule them all, right? So
Right.
it's going to be So the real challenge is the exchange. So exchanging value for value on the different pricing on different tokens. So you have to deal with that, and you want to abstract. That's the kind of thing you want to abstract away from the user.
Right.
Right now it's you have to learn about crypto to use it. Right? There's too much of a cognitive load on the end user, and that holds us back. Right? I mean, probably yourself, all of your viewers, you remember that first time. It's like, how the hell does this thing work? And having to do so much research just to set up a wallet, right? It's like, what am I doing there? Is this safe to do? Right. So you've got to take away all of those barriers from the end user. They don't want to deal with that. The retailers don't want to do. They're you end users. I just want it to, I want to be able to put in my preferences and it just do the right thing. So that's kind of on the usability end, which is very important to us. Without that, none of it's going to work.
That's very interesting. I kind of have to unpack that a bit. So where would the original liquidity be provided in this permission system to then be able to offer it to retailers to then offer it to the customers? How would that procurement happen? It would have to happen from an exchange originally, and then you're taking out the risk of that exchange at that point in time and bringing it all within your circuitry.
Yeah, so this is something that we're going to have to be funded for to get to that point. So right now we're entirely self-funded. We don't have any outside investors, so we're kind of bootstrapping our company, which is kind of tough. But mostly, the costs are in terms of time rather than capital. However, to get to the point where we're actually setting up like an internal exchange, bringing in liquidity, that's where we would be looking for basically creating a float so that the retailers can acquire either through the internal network or on public networks. So, they can sign up for a Binance or a what are we talking about? Coinbase, right? They can work through those centralized exchanges if they know about it. But in terms of something that's tuned specifically to their needs, we would need to set up something like an exchange, right? And so obviously we're going to have to provide crypto that we can also acquire from other sources, but we're just really routing it to them. So there's a number of options that we've kind of considered. And I don't think we're at a point right now where we're making any definite decisions. Does that make sense? But there are lots of options available.
It makes perfect sense. And it would help to drive the adoption of crypto overall if people could just take 40 cents and say, look, I want you to exchange, give me cash back and maybe throw it in my wallet in Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a lot of interesting financial incentives that could come out of that, especially if it's self-custodied. And it would really be similar to like asking for cash back at a grocery store and getting it back in fiat, but taking it to a digital realm of Web3. It's a lot to unpack in terms of how that could really bring about more adoption, because naturally people will then want to not just hold it but also use that crypto for other things. And the tendency, once they're in the space, just through a medium of exchange with a point of sale system, and the genesis of their crypto wallet was actually from an event related to their morning coffee, the chances of them using that more, um, that remainder cash, for example, and that cashback, and using that ADA or that ERG for something relevant to the ecosystem where that is the native asset and the base token for interacting with the protocol, um,
Hmm.
and by default the DApps on top of it. That's really a major artery, right? Having consumers be introduced to it where it's not just a speculative asset to hope goes up, but actually something that you use more to the the misnomer of cryptocurrency. And
Hmm.
going back to what you said about Bitcoin, I think that kind of uh, perverted a bit of the use cases of crypto, the history and the original idea, although it was finite, was always to be a peer-to-peer digital cash. And it
Yeah.
went away from that as people saw the price go up and
Hmm.
the scarcity also go become increasingly relevant. And it kind of influenced the rest of the industry to view it the same way. You see Ethereum burning their coins,
Hmm.
in order to become deflationary, going away from mining in order to not have this negative connotation with environmental impact. And you have a bunch of people buying ETH or buying NFTs in the hopes of increasing their wallet balance to eventually withdraw it back into fiat and break the circle that we originally had with Bitcoin. So I think going back to a more of a actual currency would help a lot for adoption. So the work that you would be doing is very important to bring in that new wave of the next billion users. So what about Cardano? You mentioned before was difficult in terms of developing on that platform because a lot of people from the outside that aren't developers, such as myself, don't really understand how Haskell can be uh, tedious at times,
Hmm.
or, for example, in Ergo's case, how Ergo script based on Scala can be very easy to work with. We don't really understand these things from the outside in. So, what has your experience been like uh, working with Cardano? I know from your Twitter that you've recently kind of cracked open the nut that is Ergo as well. What are you seeing from your point of view as you want to flesh out your vision?
Yeah, so I think the problem is Haskell. Uh, Now, Haskell is a wonderful language. Uh, Now there's a lot of myths, I think, floating around that Haskell is in some ways inherently more secure, when functional languages are inherently more secure, and I don't think that's really the case. You can write completely, you can write the most insecure software you want in any of these languages, right? Just like you can use any language to swear in, right? Um, so the main thing from the developer perspective, the problem with Haskell is it's not really an industrial language. It's not an engineering language. It's a very mathematical language, right? Um, so you have to engineers think in a different way to a mathematician. So anybody who's done maths, there's a difference between pure mathematics and applied mathematics. Um, so from an engineering point of view, engineers naturally think imperatively, like you're telling the machine what to do. Whereas all functional languages, it's more declarative. You're kind of telling them what you want. You're kind of describing how things happen, and it's a different mindset, a different way of thinking about how you're coding something. So one of the things we're doing, we use Google's language Go um, for developing some of the back end that we're working with. Um, and we're looking at Marlow as a smart scripting language. But it's not a way we think about uh, developing scripts. So one of the things we're doing in the Cardano space is we are creating like a Go library, so you can write a smart contract in Go, and just pass that then into the backend, the Plutus backend. So it basically generates the Plutus code for you that gets run on chain. But you're not having to think in that Plutus Haskell functional way. You're just defining the data as a data structure, just to make it easier access. The problem with Haskell is that its tooling isn't as far advanced to say even something like Scala. Scala has pretty good tooling because they're leveraging like the Java backends. So that's kind of a good choice, I think, in terms of an implementation language. But what's happening in Cardano is there's now a plethora of more imperative styles of interface to generate Plutus script. So I think that's becoming less of a problem. We have things like TypeScript implementation. You can just use regular TypeScript. That's PluTS. We have like some domain-specific languages that are modeled more on things like Rust and Go. So there's Icon. And then we have like a Python library that does pretty much the same thing, Option. So there's a few of these, I think, and this is being led by the community rather than input-output. So, which I think is a healthy thing. Developers are saying, yeah, I don't really want to work with this Haskell. It's not how I think about developing. It's not my engineering mindset. And rather than forcing people to think in that paradigm, let them think in their own way and then do the translation on the back end. So I think it's a lot easier now even than a year ago. So I did the Plutus Pioneer program. The first week was just setting up the environment, which is crazy. Like, people were having so much trouble just getting things set up, setting up a development environment before even getting to understanding what it is you're developing and how it works. So that's a bit of a problem and has been a problem. But with some of these newer languages, I think it's improving. It's definitely improving. But Haskell is always a little bit of a I think it's a perfect thing for the protocol level. So, and then it just comes down to writing the Plutus script using other languages. I think that's how it's going to go. It's definitely the direction we'd like to take it.
And what have you seen on the Ergo side thus far, as you've kind of begun your discovery phase with that?
So, a lot of it is just in terms of how they speak, like Ergo developers, the way they talk about the process of using extended UTXOs and what they are, and it's very clear. I really appreciate that. It was like, oh yeah, that's a good way of thinking about this. It actually helped me think more clearly about using UTXOs. So in Ergo, just call them boxes. It's a box. Oh, okay. Now I don't have to worry about unspent transaction outputs. What does that? All of that detail gets rolled up. Yeah, you just stick it in a box, and then it's just that way of thinking is very clear, and it just seems the flow, the understanding of how data flows through the system. So it naturally resonates, I think, to developers in a way that when you come to like Plutus and Plutus script, you've got a lot of head scratching. It's like, what's going on here? There's too much detail. Uh, it's too uh, it's too kind of highbrow. Whereas in the Ergo developer community, I think certainly very smart people, and it's really smartly developed. Like Ergo script is, oh, okay, no, I see this. I can see myself developing smart contracts using this language. It's not, it's not intimidating. Um, so I think it's a lot more approachable, just in terms of how you describe it, what's going on. That's a big thing. It's what I call linguistic abstraction. So the way you talk about something, so you can hide all the details. You don't have to worry about that. It's just do the thing, right? So I really appreciate that. And I think it's one of the reasons why I think it's important to go outside of your little blockchain community and explore out, see what other people are doing. Um, and I see um, a natural complement between the Ergo community and Cardano community. I mean, they're both based on the same accounting model, the UTXO model, um, which I really want to stay within that. I do not like the account-based model that's become really big part of most of the DeFi platforms, starting with the EVM and Ethereum. Um, there's reasons why UTXO works well with functional programming. It's very self-contained. You don't have you don't have like what we call global state. You don't have to know about the whole network. You just get just the information you need, and you can't like go dipping your fingers into things you shouldn't be touching. So that's why you tend to see most of these exploits that happen. They tend to happen in these account-based model networks more so than the UTXO in the UTXO world, because information is a lot more tightly constrained in boxes, nice safe boxes, right? Um, so that's the idea. Um, we kind of stick with UTXOs, which is Ergo. In terms of the smart contract space, there's really only two. There's Ergo and there's Cardano, right? Where you can do smart contracts, but it works like Bitcoin.
Uh, there are a few more, like Alephium and I believe Nervos as well. They're not extended UTXO, but I think Alephium has for sure stateful UTXOs, which kind of help to emulate some of the account-based modeling without actually having to do so. There are a few, but
Mhm.
it's definitely in the minority, that's for sure.
Right.
And
It's very experimental in terms of I think Ergo is coming out of the more experimental stages because there's lots of it's becoming more usable. So in terms of usable ones that I think have a good chance of taking off, I only really see right now Cardano and Ergo and other people building up new ideas, and they may take off. They may come up with something that really does something very different, but it's definitely in the minority. There's a few things around the edges, but the UTX model, I think, Bitcoin did it right in that sense, um, and I think the account-based model was to accommodate early thinking on smart contracts and how to do that. Um, Interesting experiment, but maybe we've learned our lesson a bit on that.
that's a very good point. It goes back to this idea that your predecessors kind of influence a lot of decision making on those chains that want to emulate the success. of those predecessors when we're thinking about Bitcoin being a storage of value versus a peer-to-peer cryptocurrency, and kind of Ethereum taking the account-based model because of either limited thinking or limited tools at the time to implement smart contracts in the UTXO based system. And then it kind of never really went back um, into Pandora's box in terms of people saying, well, I just want to emulate what Ethereum has done, and that's fine with me. Seems to be doing all right. They're number two. So off we go with Solana and Avalanche and a bunch of other ones that thankfully I don't know too much about. I try to also stay within the UTXO based community because it's a tried and true transaction architecture. And I think, for all the good Ethereum has done, it's also shown a lot of bottlenecking that can happen when you try to scale with that transaction architecture not really helping along the way. So it's very interesting that value and actual innovation do not really go hand in hand in this space as much as it should so far. And unfortunately, until we start looking at this technology as something usable, such as in the mindset that you and your co-founder are undertaking, and taking the bold initiative to bring it to the public domain in terms of end users without invasively asking them to buy crypto off of exchanges, and many times seeking and mandating that they learn about these things or be at risk of losing it all. I think that's where it becomes less intimidating for people, and the notorious reputation that cryptocurrencies can kind of have begins to fade and diminish, and we start looking at this thing as more of an everyday part of life, little by little, gradually, versus a speculative asset to kind of emulate a S&P 500 return on investment, if not more. So, yeah, all of that is very, very important. I wanted to ask you, do you anticipate that this space will continue in the direction of thinking of real world use cases, or do you anticipate kind of initiatives that you're undertaking to be in the minority, similar to how UTXO is kind of in the minority, even though it's probably the best way to pursue things?
Yeah, so that's a good point you bring up in terms of excellence versus success. We see throughout the technology space that the best technology does not necessarily win. So, which accounts for Microsoft Windows, right? It's not necessarily, it's Betamax versus VHS, all of these kind of formats. A lot of factors are not necessarily just the best technology. What's the key, I think, in our space is we've got to be willing to do the boring stuff too. So whenever people get, and particularly developers, they get into blockchain technology and they want to do all the sexy stuff, the DEXs and the DeFi and like these really kind of fascinating experiments. But for real world application, you've got to be willing to do the kind of, accounting software and a POS system. So, it's very easy to do a dedicated crypto POS system, right? There's a few out there, right? But they don't do the things that ordinarily a regular POS system. It's an addition. So it's another thing you've got to add. So our approach is to be integrated. So our POS system has to be, at the very least, as good as any other industry standard type POS system. You've got to process cash, right? You've got to be able to process credit cards, right? You've got to be agnostic of what kind of payments you're taking. And then you add on the crypto to that, right? Rather than it being crypto centric, we talk about being crypto ready. So yeah, it's like you don't have to use the crypto stuff, but if it becomes a thing, you don't have to change your POS system. You just turn it on here. So it's a selling point. Uh, People are writing in from the traditional world POS systems. They're not really thinking about crypto because they don't understand it. It's not their world, and there's no value for it. So that's part of the value that we bring, the value proposition of us writing a POS system. It's not the most fascinating thing in the world to be writing. It's not sexy, right? That's why we're not a hype company. We're not out there kind of really hyping up. How do you hype up a POS system? It doesn't, your most crypto enthusiasts and oh yeah, no, it's good somebody's doing that, but I'm not interested, right? So yeah, if you're running a business, there's lots of unsexy things you've got to do to make it work. So that's why we feel fairly confident that we're going to be able to make a success of what we're doing here, because we're looking at it from a very practical business case point of view, rather than as a trying to create something new and sexy that's going to go viral. So virality is not our goal. This is the first time I've even spoken with anybody like publicly about what our strategy is, like even on Twitter and things like that. Very low key. We're playing a very dark horse strategy in terms of how we interact with the crypto community. We'd like at some point, oh wow, there's this whole business suite that's all crypto enabled, and wow, is actually creating real buy pressure on our crypto. It should later down the road they realize, oh, this was a thing, this helped, but we don't want to make a whole bunch of promises and hype and then not be able to deliver. Right. So we want the freedom to be able to kind of pivot around the business cases. We've got to be focused there. And then we're pulling in and selecting what in crypto has value that's going to help us and help our customers. So we need to be on their side rather than on the side of the crypto enthusiast. We have different needs there. Most people who get into crypto, they don't want to be on this side. Oh, they know that, well, we've got to get there, but I don't want to do it, right? So we're the ones who have to, we all know we need sewers, right? Yeah, but nobody actually wants to work down one, right? So we're kind of the guys that say, well, you got to go down in the sewer and work with this, because we need it. Otherwise, the city is not going to run, right? It's going to be overrun by filth. Right. So that's the value that I think we're bringing to the crypto space, not necessarily that it's going to be recognized by like the crypto enthusiasts. So, yeah, it's a bit boring. Right. But that's not who we're looking. That's not who we're talking with. We're talking with retailers, business owners, service providers, and particularly small businesses. We want to give people the tools to very quickly create a new business, because we're in a bear market, not just in crypto, but the whole economy is in recession, and this is the times when you build the tools for the next cycle of growth. And so there'll be a whole bunch of new businesses starting out, and they're going to need tools to run their business. So another kind of back end part of what we're doing is we're using an ERP system that we're going to be modifying so that it integrates. So the POS system integrates with stock control, keeping track of your stock, scanning in barcodes, managing inventory, things like that. All the unsexy stuff that businesses need to do. and taking that away from them having to worry about that. They've just got the tools there. So we're really looking at building an entire business ecosystem that's crypto ready, and crypto kind of a crypto advocate within the business space, helping business owners who are not necessarily, I don't even understand this stuff, so I don't want to touch it. That the education portion is quite important. So helping business understand where the value is. Well, why should I take crypto? Right? It seems a little bit risky to me. Right? I don't understand the risks, and I don't take risks that I don't understand. Right? Uh, so we have to be transparent about what the real risks are and how they can be mitigated. So it's all that kind of boring wiring and the stuff you don't really want to think about. Well, that's the role of an engineer. That's our living space, right? We deal with the complexity that our customers don't want to deal with.
It sounds to me that what you're describing is blending the new technologies that kind of live in their own isolated echo chamber, blending that with the traditional way of living and the way that we use the current technologies that are non-crypto. That is really the hardest challenge of all. Blending it so the accessibility to use it is there, but it's not compulsory.
Mm-hmm.
And while you may describe it as unsexy, it is, at the end of the day, how we really bring value into the space that is sustainable in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like having a tourniquet on a leg, and the crypto industry is all the blood that's coagulating down there in that leg. And it just
Mm-hmm.
seems to suck in value through one way, and then you let it go and it rushes all the way out. But there's not a constant flow in exchange of blood circulating throughout the whole entire body of what would be the global economy. And if you don't have that, I think if you really don't advocate for that and somebody do the dirty work, as you say, you're going to continue to have these boom and bust cycles and centralized exchanges falling by the wayside because it's not only about regulation, it's also about uh, guiding the user's expectations to what this can do for them versus not doing it and expecting them to recklessly invest looking for the next 10x. And that's really what's going to drive it forward. So ideas such as that is also where you're going to get the most amount of, what would you say, financial resources thrown at you at the end of the day, because you're going to be the arbiter between these two different worlds that are not directly linked yet, but both of them would be better off if they were.
Exactly. I mean, I think you touched on a point which, so when we first started, so when I first met Neri, who's my co-founder, we were both doing the Cardano, the input outputs Marlow Pioneer program, and so our first idea was actually to build like an NFT marketplace focused on collectors, actual art collectors. I'm an NFT collector. I love art, and I'm always buying little pieces, never to sell. I just buy things that I want. It's like, oh, I like that. But that market really doesn't exist. After looking into it, we're going to build this kind of exchange where you could actually swap NFTs, not just buy them. It's kind of like the idea of most of us getting our first trading activity. Do you remember your first trading activity? It was probably with another kid trading some toy, like for like, doing some kind of basic barter. So we're thinking of like an enhanced barter system for NFTs. I still think it's a great idea. The problem is too early. Can't do it. The demand isn't there. People who are buying NFTs, they're buying them to flip, right? And it's completely irrational because the only investment thesis you have to buy a collectible is that people are actually collecting them, or as collectibles, as something they enjoy. And if that buy pressure isn't there, you're throwing a lot of money on the speculation that somebody's going to want it and collect it. But that actually, the prices go so high, actual collectors will never get in. They'll never actually create that. So it's actually self-destructive, right? Um, the things that people collect, they collect them. Pokemon cards, they're cheap, right? But if they'd have started off as collectibles and speculated, nobody would ever played with Pokemon cards because they couldn't afford it, right? So, and it's the same with the NFTs. If you don't have people actually collecting it as art or trading or like as a meme thing, if there's no real substance there, that 20 years down the line, I'm like, oh, I want to complete my collection. I don't have that one. I love it, right? There's a few people like that in the space, but most people aren't. The prices have been driven up, and they're going to lose money because they've actually killed the very market they're trying to benefit from, because it hasn't had a chance to grow organically. So things have to be, and that's the key. We want to like push this, push. Instead, set up the conditions for organic growth. And so that's what we're doing with Portcullis and Menabrea Labs is, you just got to dig into the fertilizer, right? So you have to start with what we have now and create like a very gentle ramp that people can, without taking on too much risk, start learning about how crypto can benefit them. We can't go from here straight up here. It's too big of a leap for people. And that's what we're asking people to do right now in this space. It's too much of a leap, right? But if you create a gradual approach, so yeah, just do what you're doing now, right? But now you've got a few more options you can start slowly exploring, right? And so, like I said, education is important. So we need to be able to communicate with our customers in a way to help bring them gradually up. You don't need to know everything all at once, right? And so to create this very gradual, organic way of growing your business and incorporating this new technology.
That would be the most sound approach, I think, as well. We see what trying to get people to jump leaps and bounds eventually does. It turns into a house of cards and everybody trying to take a lifeboat off the Titanic, unfortunately. So that's well put. I think you put forward very solid points and gave some examples, and I think the empirical data shows for all of those examples. So I kind of wanted to wrap up with ideas that you would think would be good in the future for somebody else to do in this space. What are some use cases that you would like to see helping to create a hybridization between the real world economy as it is now and the crypto economy as it should be in the future?
Mhm. So again, I think there's a lot that rests on the basic premise of a circulating cryptocurrency. So the currency circulates, right? Once that's set up, then you have all the use cases of any other currency, right? You can buy things, you set up markets, insurance. We're thinking about things like interface with the legal system. So dealing with law firms, right? because there's a number of legal issues that are opened up once we start having this fairly common circulation of private currencies or public-private, non-governmental issued currencies, right? Things like probate. You know, when you die, what happens with your crypto? Who holds onto your keys? How does that interface with your will, right? How do you? I see a big opportunity for public notaries instead of a stamp, NFT, right? So you can certify the very content. It would be a better system of for notaries. Take a hash of the document. You can do it online, right? Copyright claim. So whenever I create an image, like my PFP, I created an AI image for the Katamoto account that I have there. I made it into an NFT to assert my claim that, yeah, that I came up with that, right? So these are all very real use cases, right? Certainly NFTs right now, it's in the stage of I call it 80s synth pop stage. So when synthesizers came out, first, it was very obvious they were using everything was like synthy sound, right? And a lot of it was a little bit cheesy. You listen to it now, you're like, ugh, right? That wasn't very good. Uh, but we have synthesizer music now, but it blends more with the rest of the music, other instrumentation. It's not in your face, right? So it's matured. It's just another tool that you can use. So right now we're in the kind of 80s synth, but yeah, this is really crypto and we're really cool because we're on the cutting edge. But it's not really going to be a success until it's, yeah. Well, obviously we use the internet now. What are you talking about, right? It's like the internet isn't cool. It's just a thing that we all use, right? That's maturity. It's no longer a
Hmm.
thing. So we've got to get there if we want to be successful. But and then when you do get there, I kind of miss the old days right, when it took like 3 hours to figure out how to set up a wallet. Yeah. Um, I kind of think about the internet that way. I remember when we used Usenet, right? Uh, my first experience on the web was I didn't even have a web browser. I telnetted into the University of Birmingham's. University of Birmingham had a Lynx, which is a text-only web browser. Uh, so I used their web browser software to access the web. Crazy, right? Wonderful days. I loved it. It was great. Kind of miss that, right? Well, that's where we need to get with crypto. So now it's like, oh God, that sounds like a nightmare. You gotta like sneak into somebody's server to use. But it was fun at the time, just like crypto right now. It's kind of fun, right? You're having fun with it, right, Anthony?
Right. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a hobby. It's fascinating for us. It's like, oh God, this is really cool, and you're tracking everything, and you get quite excited about it. But really, it's just technology, right? It's not intrinsically that important. It's the possibilities that fascinate us. So,
Right.
uh, if it's just the technology, it's just plumbing, right? I'm sure the Romans were like super impressed by plumbing, right? Like, you can like pour water and it goes and it disappears. You don't have to worry about it again, right? Uh, Life doesn't change in that sense. The technology's changed, but our interaction with it remains pretty much the same. People are people, right? We don't want to deal with messy details if we don't have to. So once we get to that point, then we can start saying that crypto is starting to get into the mainstream.
Perfect. Well put. I want to thank you for your insightful thought process, especially as a developer, which is kind of this: if you're not in the know, you don't know. You just sit on the sidelines and hope people develop cool things. I want to also congratulate you on taking that initiative to do the plumbing, to do the sewer work. That will be necessary to make sure that our industry is not just a hype machine and a, a way for the media to uh, kind of spell doomsday narratives for all the underlying technology that's so promising, uh, and inevitably will. I don't want to say like kind of the Bitcoin maximalist is not going to take over the existing system. It will simply blend with it and take the best parts of it and leave the rest behind. So, without further ado, thank you again, Nyk. That was really good. I didn't really have to talk all that much. I just had to let you stream your thought process, and I think everybody appreciates what you said. So, thank you for giving us another perspective that we don't always see. That's more based in reality, and you know, also innovation as well.
Well, thanks a lot for the opportunities to speak, Anthony, and it's wonderful meeting. Just one thing I'd like to add to
Sure.
your listeners. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Anthony's channel. He needs all the help any YouTuber can get, right? As he's building up his channel. He's doing wonderful work. I really appreciate what you're doing. And I think anybody who stumbles across this video, it's literally just a click. Go ahead and a couple of clicks. So I just wanted to do that to help support what you're doing as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I never mentioned that in the videos, do I? But thank you for doing that for me. uh, so one last thing before we go. How's living in Thailand? How's that? Do you ever miss the West, or are you permanently fixated on staying there?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's life is good. Sabai sabai, as they say in Thailand. It's everything is comfortable. So now there's a few things I miss from the US, I guess. It's always food. Like I miss really good fish and chips from the UK, and now I miss things like biscuits and gravy and things like that. Certain comfort foods from the US. So, but other than that, life's wonderful. It's great out here. Yeah.
Wonderful. I will put some links in the description below for those that are interested in following more of what you and your company are doing on a day-to-day basis. Uh, I would urge you guys as well to take a look. Try to follow some real uh, developers trying to foster in real world uses. That's always going to be the perhaps unsexy thing, but the thing that we need most, especially now in this industry. So thank you again, Nyk. It was a pleasure for me as well. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
All right. See you guys in the next one. Thank you for tuning in.